Whitechapel, September 1888. The fog does not lift in the East End, it settles, thick and permanent like the poverty. Mary Ann Nichols walks through the narrow alley between tenements. Her shoes are worn through at the heel. She is 43 but looks older. The gin still burns in her throat from an hour ago when she had the money for it. Behind her, footsteps. Not hurried, steady. She turns. A man. Well-dressed for this neighborhood, clean hands. He smiles, polite, almost apologetic. Lost, miss? She lets out a breath. A gentleman, maybe a few coins for her time. Not lost, love, just tired. He steps closer. Then rest. The knife enters below her ribs, angled upward toward the heart. His left hand covers her mouth gently, almost tenderly. No struggle, no noise. He lowers her to the wet cobblestones like a father putting a child to bed. Then the real work begins. The cuts are deliberate, confident, the kind of confidence that comes from practice or training or both. He opens her abdomen with the precision of someone who knows exactly where the organs sit. No hesitation, no mistakes. When he finishes, he arranges her, hands at her sides, skirt pulled down, almost modest, head turned just so. He wipes the blade on her shawl, folds it, and slips it back into his coat. No weapon left behind. No money taken. No sexual component. Just a signature. He walks toward the back exit of the alley, the one that leads away from the police patrol route, and disappears into the fog. 3 hours later, a constable finds her. By morning, every newspaper in London is screaming the same name. Jack the Ripper. Morning light streams through the windows of 221B Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes sits at the breakfast table surrounded by newspapers. Every front page carries the same word. Ripper, Ripper, Ripper. The press gave him a myth before the police even had a suspect. Dr. John Watson stands by the window, reading over his shoulder. Police baffled. No motive, no witnessing. Terror grips the East End. Holmes says nothing. His eyes scan the columns like a machine processing data. A knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson shows in Inspector Lestrade. The man looks like he has not slept in days. Mr. Holmes, Lestrade says. Holmes does not look up. Inspector, we need your help. Obviously. Lestrade removes his hat, turning it in his hands. 4 women. Throats cut. Mutilated. No witnesses. No clear motive. The city is in a panic, Mr. Holmes. We are drowning. Holmes finally looks up. 5. Lestrade blinks. I beg your pardon? 5 women. You simply have not found the last body yet. Holmes folds the newspaper with surgical precision. Show me everything, and tell your men to stop trampling my crime scenes. Watson reaches for his coat. Lestrade nods, pale. As they move toward the door, Holmes pauses. One more thing, Inspector. This man is not working alone. Lestrade frowns. You think there is more than one killer? No, Holmes says. I think someone taught him how to think. The alley where Mary Ann Nichols died still smells of blood and damp stone. Holmes kneels where the body was found. His fingers hover over the cobblestones without touching them. Watson, medical assessment. Watson crouches beside him, pulling out his notebook. Throat severed left to right, he says. Killer was right-handed. The abdominal wounds came after death. Deep, confident incisions. No hesitation marks. Whoever did this has surgical experience. Height? Holmes asks without looking up. Based on the angle of the throat wound, average. 5'9", perhaps 5'10". Strong enough to control her without a struggle, but not exceptionally large. Time of death? Coagulation suggests between 2 and 4 in the morning. Holmes stands, eyes tracing the alley. 3 exits. He chose the one that avoids the patrol route, which means he knows the police schedule. He has been watching. Watson closes his notebook. A doctor? He asks. Possibly, Holmes replies. but more importantly, a man with purpose. This was not rage, Doctor. This was composition. Later at the police morgue, Watson stands over the body of Mary Ann Nichols. She is covered now, but he has seen enough. He stares at her face, worn, middle-aged, a hard life written in every line. "I saw women like her in Afghanistan," Watson says quietly. "Camp followers, washerwomen. Nobody writes their names in the dispatches. When they die of cholera or typhus, they go into unmarked graves." He pauses. "But because of how she died, now we know her name. Mary Ann Nichols. The whole city knows it." Holmes is silent for a moment beside him. "He understands that, I think," Holmes says at last. "He is not just killing women, Watson. He is making them visible. For the first time in their lives, London is paying attention. Not to them, but to what was done to them. To him." Watson looks up, disturbed. "You are saying he thinks this is meaningful?" "I am saying he has convinced himself it is," Holmes answers. "That is what makes him dangerous. He is not a drunk with a knife. He is an artist with a thesis." Back at Baker Street, Holmes pins a map of Whitechapel to the wall. 5 red marks. 5 murders. Watson pours brandy and watches him. "A madman," Watson says. "No," Holmes taps the map. "Madness is chaos. This is architecture." He draws lines connecting the crime scenes. "Look, each murder is more elaborate than the last. He is not devolving, he is escalating, refining his method, learning." "From what?" Watson asks. "From results, from the press coverage, from the terror." Holmes turns from the map. "No one wakes up knowing how to perform surgery in the dark without making mistakes. Someone showed him there was more than one way to use a knife." Watson sets down his glass. "Holmes, you cannot possibly mean—" "I need to speak with Professor Moriarty. The facility is deep beneath Westminster. Old dungeons, repurposed after the Fenian bombings." Holmes and Watson descend a spiral staircase. Gaslight flickers against wet stone walls. The air smells of damp and carbolic acid. 2 guards stand at the bottom. A heavy iron door reinforced with steel. One of them unlocks it. 20 minutes, Mr. Holmes," the guard says. "Do not approach the bars." Watson's hand rests on his revolver. Holmes notices but says nothing. The cell is surprisingly comfortable. A narrow bed, a writing desk, shelves lined with books on mathematics, philosophy, a Sanskrit grammar. In the center, seated in a wooden chair, hands folded neatly in his lap, is Professor James Moriarty, mid-50s, thin, pale, impeccably groomed despite months of confinement. Wire-rimmed spectacles catch the gaslight. He does not stand. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson." Moriarty smiles faintly. "How kind of you to visit." His voice is soft, cultured. No hostility, just faint curiosity. Holmes stops at the line marked on the floor, 10 feet from the bars. "Professor," he says. Moriarty tilts his head slightly. "I have been reading about your Whitechapel problem," he says. "Dreadful business, though I confess surprised that you would consult me. Blood spatter and tobacco ash are your specialty, are they not?" "I am not here for forensics," Holmes replies. "No?" Moriarty's eyes are calm, analytical. "You are here because you do not understand the why. You can deduce who and how, but the purpose eludes you." Watson speaks, his voice tight. "We are investigating a murderer, Professor, not a philosopher." Moriarty's gaze shifts to Watson. Something flickers there. Assessment, calculation. "Murder is philosophy, Doctor," he says. "Apply philosophy." Holmes cuts in. "What do you see when you look at this case?" Moriarty leans back slightly in the chair. "I see a man who has been invisible his entire life, ignored, perhaps mocked, and now for the first time the entire city speaks his name. Well, the name he chose. Jack. Elegant in its simplicity." "Is he working alone?" Holmes asks. Moriarty's smile is faint. "No one works entirely alone, Mr. Holmes. Every system has inputs, trauma, intelligence, opportunity. But inputs alone produce only noise. What you are seeing in Whitechapel is not noise. It is signal, which means someone showed him the equation. Holmes watches him carefully. What equation? Moriarty spreads his hands, a gesture of mock helplessness. How does an invisible man become impossible to ignore? Silence. Then Moriarty adds, "Tell me, have you considered that he might stop?" "Why would he?" Holmes asks. "Because he may have already achieved his objective," Moriarty replies. "He is no longer invisible. The question is whether he is satisfied or whether someone has convinced him there is a higher function to fulfill." Holmes's jaw tightens. "What function?" "That would depend on who is writing the formula, would it not?" Moriarty says mildly. 3 days later, another body, Annie Chapman, found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street, Spitalfields. This time, the mutilation is worse. Organs removed and arranged beside the body in a deliberate pattern. The uterus taken entirely. London erupts. Vigilante mobs form in the East End. Women refuse to leave their homes after dark. The city is paralyzed. Holmes examines the scene at dawn before the crowds arrive. He notices something the police missed. Faint scratches on the fence. Someone leaned a small object here. A candle, perhaps, or a shuttered lantern. "He had light," Holmes murmurs. "Not much, but enough. He was not rushed. He felt safe." Watson kneels beside the chalk outline, pale. "Could he be a constable? Someone who knows the patrol schedules?" he asks. "No," Holmes says. "But he is studying them, timing them. This is field work, Doctor." Holmes also notices a pattern in the victims. All 5 women lived in lodging houses owned by the same landlord, a man named Silas Renwick. A businessman who has been systematically buying up Whitechapel slums, evicting tenants, and negotiating redevelopment contracts with the city. He is not selecting randomly, Holmes says. There is a structure beneath this. Holmes returns to Moriarty's cell alone. Moriarty is reading Principia Mathematica, margins filled with annotations. He looks up, unsurprised. "Another body, I presume?" he says. Holmes places sketches of the crime scene on the small table near the bars. Moriarty examines them with the detachment of a professor grading papers. "He is accelerating," Moriarty says. "The interval between kills is shortening. Textbook escalation." "Why?" Holmes asks. "Because the first was experimental, the second confirmatory. By now the act itself has become necessary. He has discovered he enjoys it, not the violence, but the control." Holmes leans forward slightly. "You said someone is guiding him. What does that person gain?" Moriarty sets down the sketches. "Chaos is valuable, Mr. Holmes," he says. "When a city is paralyzed by fear, certain opportunities arise. Property values drop. Politicians make desperate decisions. Contracts get signed without scrutiny." He pauses. "A clever man could profit immensely." "You are describing extortion," Holmes says. "I am describing economics," Moriarty replies. "Fear is a commodity. Your Ripper is simply the mechanism of production." Holmes's voice is cold. "And you know about mechanisms." "I study systems," Moriarty says. "Criminal networks, financial markets, human behavior, they are all systems. Your Ripper is an exquisitely simple one. Input trauma and guidance, output terror and profit." "Whose profit?" Holmes asks. Moriarty smiles faintly. "Now that is the right question." Holmes investigates Silas Renwick, a former banker, now a slum landlord. Over the past year, he has acquired dozens of Whitechapel properties at below-market rates. Since the murders began, Renwick has been negotiating with city officials to demolish the slums and build new housing. Lucrative government contracts. Holmes digs deeper. Renwick's bank records show regular payments to a consulting firm with no listed address. The firm traces back to a shell company. The director? A clerk who visits Professor Moriarty once a month, listed as his legal representative. The equation becomes visible. Third visit. Holmes brings the bank records. Moriarty glances at them, then at Holmes. "Ah," he says, You found Mr. Renwick, industrious. You are advising him, Holmes says. I provide consulting services to several clients, Moriarty replies. Economic modeling, risk assessment, entirely legal. Holmes steps to the edge of the marked line on the floor. And the Ripper? He asks quietly. Did you also tell him where to aim his knife? Moriarty does not deny it. Hypothetically, Mr. Holmes, if one were to encounter a man suffering from profound humiliation and rage, and if one were to suggest that his grievances could be expressed rather than suppressed, and if one were to observe that certain parts of London are under-policed and over-reported, would that constitute a crime? You created him, Holmes says. I finished what was already begun, Moriarty says calmly. The man you are hunting was broken long before I met him. All I did was show him how to make his pain significant. Without me, he would have killed his wife in a drunken rage and hanged in obscurity. Instead, he is immortal. They will still speak his name 100 years from now. Holmes's hands clench at his sides. You are telling me this because you know I cannot prove it. I am telling you this because I want you to understand, Moriarty says. The man with the knife is not the author. He is the illustrator. Silence. Then Moriarty adds almost gently, and because I want you to ask yourself, why do you care so much? You have solved dozens of murders. Why does this one consume you? Holmes turns toward the door without answering. Moriarty calls after him. When you catch him, Mr. Holmes, will you feel victorious? Or will you feel empty? September 30th, 1888. Holmes knows where the Ripper will strike. Moriarty made a mistake. He spoke in the past tense about the Ripper's immortality, as if the work were already complete, which means one final act, something spectacular. 2 locations, 2 victims in one night, proof of capability. Holmes, Watson, and a dozen plainclothes officers spread across Whitechapel. Holmes positions himself near Mitre Square, Watson near Burner Street. The fog is thick, streets empty. At 1:45 a.m., a woman enters Mitre Square. Catherine Eddowes, drunk, swaying. Behind her, a man, average height, dark coat. Holmes lifts a hand, signaling the officers to hold. They wait. The man approaches Eddowes, speaks quietly. She nods, follows him into the shadows. Holmes drops his hand. Officers close in. The man's hand moves toward his coat. Watson comes out of the dark behind him and tackles him to the ground. They crash to the cobblestones. A knife skitters away. The man fights, desperate, strong, but the constables pin him. Holmes kneels. He reaches out and pulls back the man's hat. A face no one will remember. Thin, hollow-eyed, 30s. Dr. Edmund Gull, Holmes says softly. Struck off the medical register 3 years ago. Scotland Yard, interrogation room. Gull sits in a chair, hands shackled. He is laughing, or weeping, it is hard to tell. He told me I was exceptional, Gull says, that my work mattered, that they would remember me forever. Holmes leans forward across the table. Who? He asks. Gull shakes his head, still smiling. It does not matter, he was right. Jack the Ripper. They will write books, plays. I will be in the medical journals after all. You killed 5 women, Holmes says. I liberated them, Gull replies. Made them seen. For the first time in their miserable lives, the world looked at them. Watson's hand tightens on his revolver at his side. Holmes's voice is ice. You gave them death. I gave them immortality. Gull's eyes are wide, feverish. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, more famous now than any queen. Who taught you? Holmes asks. Gull laughs. A professor, a gentleman, a man who understands that the world is a system and systems can be rewritten. He told me you would come. He said, Holmes will solve it. He will catch you. And then he will realize he has been dancing to my composition the entire time. Dr. Edmund Gull is hanged at Newgate Prison 3 weeks later. In his final statement, he quotes medical texts, poetry, and one phrase he claims a professor once told him. Be invisible until you are impossible to ignore. Holmes is in the gallery. He closes his eyes when he hears it. He has heard those exact words before. 1 week after the execution, Holmes returns to the cell beneath Westminster. Moriarty is writing. Mathematical proofs, dense with symbols, spill across the page. He looks up. "Mr. Holmes," he says, "I heard about Dr. Go. Tragic, though he did achieve what he wanted." Holmes stops at the line on the floor. "You used him," Holmes says. "I provided a framework," Moriarty replies. "What he did within it was his choice." "You orchestrated the chaos so Renwick could profit," Holmes says. "Prove it," Moriarty answers. Silence stretches between them. "You cannot, of course," Moriarty continues. "I never touched a knife, never wrote a threatening letter, never set foot in Whitechapel. I simply consulted." Holmes steps to the very edge of the line. "You turned a broken man into a weapon." "I gave a broken man purpose." Moriarty's voice is calm. 5 women who were dying anyway, of disease, poverty, violence. I did not create Whitechapel's conditions. I simply recognized an opportunity within an existing system. "You used the city as a chessboard," Holmes says. Moriarty smiles. "And you used it as a stage," he replies. "Tell me, what is the difference? You needed the Ripper. Without monsters, Mr. Holmes, what are you?" Holmes does not answer. Moriarty leans back in his chair. "You have arrested the hand. Congratulations," he says. "The mind remains unproven, but do come back when you have another variable you cannot solve." Holmes turns toward the door. Moriarty's voice follows him. "One more thing. When you lie awake tonight, ask yourself, did you win, or did you simply end the game before I was finished?" Late evening, 221B Baker Street. The fire is burning low. Watson pours brandy into 2 glasses. "We stopped him," Watson says. "The Ripper is dead." Holmes stares into the flames. "We stopped the knife," he answers, "not the hand that aimed it." "Moriarty will stay locked up," Watson begins. "For now," Holmes says. Watson sits heavily in his chair opposite him. "And the women?" he asks quietly. "Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes. Does anyone even remember their names?" Holmes finally looks at him. "No," he says. "They remember Jack the Ripper. The victims are footnotes. The killer is mythology." Outside, London moves on. The papers have shifted to new scandals. Whitechapel returns to its usual poverty. The Ripper is dead. But the world that ignored his victims until they became spectacle, that remains. And 2 minds, Holmes and Moriarty, continue their game. One hunting monsters, one making them. The city keeps bleeding.